Um, hey there, friends, family, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth. We have a special episode of Disguise coverage for you tonight. I, of course, am here. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant, pro 2_ ANT on the old Twitter. But I'm not alone on tonight's podcast. Joining me for his first appearance ever on Disguise coverage is the elusive, the enigmatic, the illustrious, the notorious. These all just came off the top of my head. I didn't pre-plan.
Notorious is also a good one, yeah.
Oh, that would be a good one. The I don't have another
Bald,
one.
shiny.
Oh, yeah, that's too much low-hanging fruit.
Follically challenged.
The follically challenged.
Yeah.
Aaron Quinn from the Cover One Buffalo podcast. I'm super pumped that you're here. How are you?
Yeah, dude, I have been dodging you, and I'm sorry about that. Because honestly, here's the thing. I love doing our show. Yeah, with Greg watching us. I feel like I'm cheating a little bit. I do a couple other shows, but I don't do a lot of other stuff, just time and stuff. But I wanted to do your show because I love that you're on our team, and I love your work. And I'm not going to lie. Some of the times you've asked me, I've had stuff going on for real. And just been too busy. But when I see Greg coming on and I see our friend Bruce coming on, I get a little jealous that I wasn't on. So I'm glad to have christened myself on your show.
I appreciate you coming by. I was definitely pumped, and I knew from all the other previous times, yeah, you have a lot going on in good ways in general. So getting a hold of you, it's trying to wrangle a snake. And I knew there was some, I was like, sometimes I was like, he's busy. And then other times I was like,
maybe I'm not.
He just doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, no, maybe I'm not. Sometimes I'll admit it. Elusive is a good word. Cause even real relationships, I'm still elusive when it comes to going out to do stuff with people. It's just, fair. I don't know, man. It's just me, but I like you and I like your work and I'm super happy. And you picked some good topics for tonight.
I did pick some good topics. You were doing me a huge solid for this. I want to pull up this comment real quick. Yeah, I do have legit hair. I'm not wearing a beanie or a hat tonight. I decided against it. I don't know. I was just feeling it.
You're just trying. I think it was because I'm on you. You're just trying to rub it in.
Yeah, I think maybe I
look at all this hair.
Yeah, check what I got going on here. Even though I shave it down to a 2 or a 4 on my head at all times, so I don't really have it. But yeah, you're doing me a big solid coming on tonight. I've been out of the country for the last more than several days on a little vacation.
Why'd you do that? Oh, okay.
Yeah, just a little vacation, just living the dream. And then I was like, well, I got to do some stuff. But I wasn't kind of was going to do the show, but I was like, what can I do to spice it up and help things a little bit? And so I reached out and I knew what you had said the last time after I reached out to you. And you were like, I can't do it this week because I got in-laws in town.
That was true. I did have
I'm definitely in. And I was like, as I was I was emailing you. As I was emailing you, I was like, let's see what he says this time.
Honestly, your show, I've talked to my wife a few times because there have been a few times where I just didn't want to do any show or do anything. And I'm like, oh, I feel bad. I really like this guy. I just got to do his show. I just got to do it. And so when you asked this time, I was like, I'm committing to it. I'm doing it. I'm not going to back out. I want to get on with Anthony because we had you on our show and we've had a lot of guests. And sometimes when you bring somebody on, especially Greg and I have an established thing, it can be a little weird going back and forth with people, but you just jumped right in and we're the third brother, maybe half brother that we never had that came right into the mix. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be here, man. And all the wrestling talk off air got me excited too.
Oh, it's some good talk. It's some good wrestling talk for sure. That still had me. I'm still not even I went out of Bills mode and I was just in full wrestling mode as we started talking before. And I feel like I'm no longer prepared to do the episode because everything that I prepped all flushed out. And I'm just let's just talk about New Japan and let's talk about this and let's talk about that. But no, I'm excited and I love the kind words that you have bestowed upon me and the show. I've been a fan of yours and Greg's and Cover One for a long time. So it's really awesome.
Appreciate that, man.
To have you here. And we've got some good stuff to get into tonight. But before we get into that, I want to give some fun facts about today's date. I've been doing this for the last several shows and I think it's fun.
I love these things. Let's hear it.
Yeah, there we go. So June 17th, famous things that have happened in June 17th. In 1885, the Statue of Liberty arrived in New York Harbor. That's
just
a fun little fact.
Bunch of pieces. Yeah. I've never seen pictures of its arrival.
I also felt like it's a
IKEA setup.
Yeah, right. Just little putting it together. I also found I just feel like I'm too like untrustworthy of people. Like I would be like, what do you mean, France? You're going to give me this giant statue? Like, I don't trust this.
What's in it?
Yeah, exactly. I'd be like,
doing?
thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. I don't know. It's pretty though. It's a pretty statue.
Pretty. It's a pretty
statue. They
statue.
gave it to us.
It's pretty big as well, and it's pretty cool. But majority of cool things that have happened, well, not cool things, but memorable things on June 17th. I would be remiss if I didn't mention pretty much everything that happened from June 17th, 1994, which was Arnold Palmer playing his final round of his U.S. Open career in golf. So that's fun. Ken Griffey Jr.
Loved him.
Yeah, Palmer or Griffey?
No, Ken Griffey Jr.
Oh, Griffey.
Oh, big time. What did he do?
He did some cool things. He hit home run number 26 on June 17th, which tied Babe Ruth for the most home runs ever hit before June 30th. A record which
94
Ken Griffey,
also.
Correct. Yeah. And then Griffey would break that record 5 days later when he homered on June 22nd, which is pretty cool.
He was awesome.
He was so good. And he didn't do steroids or do anything like that, which is also another really. Oh man, if I ever found out Griffey did steroids, that would break my heart.
No, there's no way because he fell off.
Yeah,
like towards the end.
And you could tell by
he lost the power. Yeah,
he lost the power.
Well, Bonds was like still smacking.
Yeah, right. Just still hitting like 95 home runs a year, and like and Sosa with the steroids and the cork bat. McGuire, same thing. Oh, Griffey just did it right.
Yeah.
The World Cup began on June 17, 1994, for the first ever World Cup that began on U.S. soil. That was pretty cool. And then the two big things that are always simultaneously linked. So we had Game 5 of the NBA Finals between the Knicks and Rockets, which the Knicks won. Patrick Ewing had a game. But this was the game that was interrupted by the O.J. Simpson chase.
Correct. Yeah.
And all of that happened, minus the Statue of Liberty. Everything I just mentioned happened on June 17, 1994.
What a day.
Pretty eventful day.
What a day. The 90s were great.
They were the best.
I don't doubt it. I feel like every day in the 90s was awesome.
They were the best. TV shows were the best.
Basketball. You mentioned basketball. Basketball was the best. Even without Jordan in those years, it was still great.
So good.
Wrestling was the best.
Oh, don't
Music
get me.
was the best.
Music. Oh, dude, music and wrestling, pop culture things in the 90s just, I wish I wasn't. That is a chef's kiss moment. I wish I wasn't such a tiny baby. And
there's a bunch of 80s babies out there yelling at us about Star Wars.
Right? You don't know anything.
You don't know anything. Flock of seagulls for life.
Have you ever heard REO Speedwagon? All just random things. Yeah, that was an important day. And today is an important day. I'm sure, 20, 30 years from now, people will talk about June 17th, 2021 and talk about this
because we got together.
That's exactly what it is because people know. I'm glad that Greg is upset in the chat because you and I are together and I've brought you over to the dark side. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I like it. He did you. Why can't I?
That's exactly.
I mean, the show. He did the show. Yeah. You know? Why can't I get a turn?
Why can't we share?
Yeah.
The throuple? Oh, interesting comment from Griff. 80s baby here. The 90s was better.
Some people get it.
I like it.
I appreciate that.
Pull up a couple comments there. Joseph's birthday is tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Griff had
I was jealous of people. I'm a January birthday. I was jealous of people that had nice weather birthdays. You could do whatever you want.
That's true. Plus, it's a January birthday. You're like close to Christmas, and I feel like you have the chance of getting shortchanged because people are like, "Oh, here's happy birthday / Christmas," and you're like, "No, I want two separate things."
Separate that. But then I was stuck inside. All birthdays.
That's true. You can't do anything. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you could hope that like your birthday, you get like a snow day, and then you can out and have like an awesome day. That'd be pretty sweet.
Sure. Yeah.
That's few and far between.
I got a lot of my birthdays. It's on the 15th, so Martin Luther King Day. I would get plenty of birthdays. Not every year. Every once in a while.
Sprinkled in. Those are the memorable ones.
Yeah.
Oh boy. We should just keep going down this rabbit hole on birthday takes and wrestling.
Who else?
I would say everybody who else has birthdays, throw them in the comments.
Everyone's got a birthday. Let's hear them.
You would think. Maybe someone doesn't.
I'm sure there are.
Everybody.
Bruce Nolan doesn't have a birthday.
No, of course not. He's not a real person. But he's verified on Twitter.
Right. True.
Might not have.
Good point. They went and needed his birthday to verify it.
Can you imagine that process for him? They'd just be like, "What's this?" And he's like, "Why?" Or like, "No,
no, I will not."
It's super dry. Oh no, yeah, no,
I will not.
No, I will not.
Information.
Oh man, this has been a good start. You're a good guy. You're a good guest.
That's why I don't go on a lot of it. I got to say a little bit of me goes a long way.
That's what she said.
You don't want too much of me. Trust me.
Quality over quantity, though.
Yeah, for sure.
You get it. I understand. We've all been there. That's what she said. Let's start.
Yep.
Buffalo Bills, mandatory minicamp takeaway. So the Bills had mandatory minicamp from the 15th to the 17th, which includes today, but they didn't have anything that happened today. They announced, they kind of, I don't want to say a letdown, but I thought it was interesting. What do you have any thoughts or anything on that, on them scrapping the last day?
Well, so yeah, I have thoughts that like I'm conflicted because as a fan, I want more content. I want to see more Josh Allen throwing balls, Stephon Diggs running sick routes, them in shorts. I want all that stuff because we have a long stretch now. This is the worst. People think the stretch of waiting for the draft is bad. This is the worst, folks. Yeah, all the people out there that create content, tell them how much you appreciate them because it's hard this time of year because there's nothing. Everyone's gone out of the building. Nobody's making any news. So the 3 days is all you get. And I wanted all 3 days as a fan, but as a somebody that looks at this team and tries to look at it objectively, I think that's a good sign. I think that means Sean McDermott was happy with the work that the guys came and put in, and otherwise he would have had them stay there. He's a perfectionist. He's into details. He's meticulous. So for him to give him that day off tells me that he was really happy with how everything went for those couple of days, and he wanted to reward his players. And so that tells me things are going well at one Bills drive. So that part of me was happy, but I don't get any content.
Yeah, I'm literally in the same boat. Like selfishly, I was like, I want to see another day of practice. I want some more like random film clips. I want to see some stuff. But yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. That was my thought, especially after McDermott's comments during OTAs about like the players who weren't there. And his comment, kind of granted it's some coach speak, but him saying like, we believe everybody being here. That's how you get better. We want everybody here, so on and so forth. So we know, to your point, combining that with his perfectionist mindset, he wants practice. He wants everybody there. He's all about the regiment and the routine. So the fact that they scrapped the last day made me feel good. Like we're either hitting on all cylinders or we're ahead of schedule. And he felt so good that it's like, you know what, cool, we can close up shop right now and we don't have to worry about anything. And from a little bit from an injury standpoint, knowing that there's like one less chance for somebody to go down with something, however small it may be. I feel bad for Brian Cox going down. That really sucked, and that put a damper on things. So I was like, that made me feel good.
A reminder that while it's fun to see all this clips, I'm always a little nervous this time of year when I see Diggs cutting into the turf because this time of year it's a really weird. You want the rookies to come in and get sort of onboarded into how things are. You want the vets back to check in on them, and you're installing some stuff, but in past years, this was a lot more important time for the Buffalo Bills because we always had new coaches and new offensive coordinators and new everything. So you're installing a whole system. Now you're really coming in with a team that's got some vets. Milano was talking about the leadership on defense and how far ahead the defense is because these guys have all been playing together. They know the defense. They know what they're supposed to do. So you're really starting at a baseline that's higher than normal for Buffalo Bills going into this session. And so now it doesn't mean quite as much to me. I don't know how much they gain in OTAs versus if this team just came in at training camp because of the amount of experience and understanding of the playbook and all this stuff. I don't think they probably brought in a ton of new stuff. Maybe. I'm sure Brian Dable brought in some new concepts to work on, but relatively speaking, I don't know how important this part of the process is. I think a lot of it's for show at this point with the NFL, just to keep that all year sort of sprinkled in that the NFL is a year-long
cycle going
business, and it works. I consumed every single video and picture that I could get, but you do worry about having injuries come up at this time of year because it's a real sneaky time of year, dude. You get something that needs a little bit of a surgery and some time, and then you're pushing into camp. You start to get these guys that you're not sure if they're going to even make it in camp, and are you even going to see them before the season starts? I don't want to deal with any of that knowing where the Bills are at. So I'm glad that they cleared it. I think that's a great point by you that they cleared it a day early. Now we don't have to worry about injuries again until camp, hopefully, knock on wood.
Yep. You brought up a good point there, and I think this ties into some of the takeaways that we're going to talk about in this episode. It's a weird spot still that I'm adjusting to as a person who loves the Bills and follows the Bills. Like being in a spot going into an off season or a camp where I'm not like, okay, this is terrible and it needs to get better, or like, hopefully we can do this and all this, like, hopes
we get this better.
Exactly. Now, like having an actual team with proper people steering the ship and talent and quality and having more little things to take away and pull away from instead of being like, okay, like who can establish themselves as the franchise quarterback? Like, okay, do we see if anybody can be worth their salt on offense? Or otherwise, do we have to draft something at this spot versus all like the generic comments
which
and thoughts.
undrafted wide receiver are we hoping turns into the next
that
great wide receiver? Yeah,
exactly. And that we need to turn into that because we don't have talent or we don't have depth. Now, I was excited last year too, but I'm even more excited this year going into camp and going into the preseason to be able, I guess, like to take my foot off the gas a little bit and just be able to focus on like, oh, cool. Like I want to see how this drafted player does or what this second year player looks like. Exactly. Instead of having to worry about the top end things, because we don't need to worry about those top end things. And it all connects with, being able to end camp a day early and not have to worry about your starters and not worry about your studs. And it ties into talking about these things for the minicamp that we're going to talk about, because a lot of them are detail pieces that will affect this team and impact this team. But it's nice to go into a mandatory minicamp and then a training camp and a preseason and a start of the regular season, knock on wood, where we know what we have in a lot of things and we're not hoping and stretching and wishing because we've got an established unit. It's still a weird thing to adjust to as a Bills fan. I'm still like paranoid and looking over my shoulder every minute like it's not real.
Yeah, but this is, I think fans for years, not just with Sean McDermott, but coaches in general, we hear about coach speak, and a lot of coaches in Buffalo organization throughout the years have talked about trying to get continuity. And I think people got frustrated with words like that, like whatever, just win. But this feeling that we're talking about is the feeling that you get from continuity of a good football team. You said it, having the right people steering the ship, having the players in place, the leadership council, like they have all the things in place. Think about this roster, and we'll talk about probably some of these battles that are going to happen in camp. But I agree with you. I'm most excited about camp for some of these low-end roster battles of who's going to get those last spots out of the 6 defensive linemen, or who's going to be the last cornerback to be here. And not because I'm not excited because I think that person's going to come in and have a ton of production in 2021. I'm excited because there's real talent at that spot that is significant for the Bills, which we haven't really had in a long time. If you look at this roster, I maybe think there's 3 starting positions that are up for grabs in a sense, right? Cornerback 2, running back, I think is up for grabs between Singletary and Moss. And what else? Cody Ford. I think Cody Ford's job's up for grabs. Still to see how he heals, but anyone else like really up for grabs?
Think like what's one of the things we've been talking about the most this offseason, like who's going to be our kick returner and punt returner? Like that's a big storyline for the roster.
For sure.
Like, and that's the fact that is one of our biggest positional battles is such a thing. I pulled up this comment. I thought it was really great because what it used to be for the Bills, what Griff here is saying, it used to be what undrafted free agent is going to make the team. Now it's what day 3 player is going to make the team. We've increased the depth of this roster to the point that, day 2 and day 3 guys aren't seen as immediate contributors. Even look at, Gregory Rousseau, who everybody's talking about, him having a successful year, what his snap percentage is, he's probably going to get anywhere from like 25 to 35% of snaps. He's not a guy who's going to come in and he's starting every single down and he needs to be a day 1 guy. Like we can rotate him in. Same thing with AJ Epinesa last year. We've grown this team to the point where you got guys that you're taking at all points in the draft. And it's like, well, they'll be a rotational guy or will they make the team? We'll see. It's a crazy jump.
Oh, yeah, totally. I do want to touch on Richard Connolly's comment here, tight end. I'm offended that you talk about Dawson Knox that way while I'm on the show. I don't know that that's up for grabs. I think that's unless Ertz walks through the door, I think it's got to be Knox's job to lose.
I'm going to give it to Hollister.
You think?
No.
Oh my God! I thought you were serious for a second. I think he's going to be a productive part of this offense sprinkled in. Hollister, I think they'll find a good way to use him, but I think Knox is a step ahead of him right now. Yeah,
I think Knox is the 1 and Hollister as of now is the 2. I would prefer. I think right now, if we were to acquire Zach Ertz, I think Zach Ertz is a better tight end than Dawson Knox, and I think he makes the Bills. Yes, today, right now, at this point, but. Again, long term, I'm hoping it's Knox. I'm still on that whole Greg Tom said hope is not a plan thing, but I think people are also, everybody's at the opposite ends of the spectrum. Some people think getting Ertz is going to destroy Dawson Knox, and other people think we don't need Ertz at all because Dawson Knox is way better. I see it in the middle. I think Dawson Knox got a lot better last year. Joe Marino put a fantastic podcast together and said some things about Knox on how he progressed over the last 9 games and what he did. I just would like the weapon option of having both Zach Ertz and Dawson Knox. I like the idea of being able to run a more effective 12 personnel at times if we want to. I like having more depth and more roster flexibility. I don't want to pay Zach Ertz a bunch of money. I don't want to give up a first, a second, or a third for him. I don't want to eat a lot of that contract. But if you tell me like, you know, we're going to give Philly a 5th round pick and have to pay Zach Ertz like $4 million, yeah, I would take that in a heartbeat. But I'm not ready to, and I'm not doing that because I'm signing off on Dawson Knox and I think he's terrible.
Right. Yeah, no, actually, I feel like I'm in the same boat. I'll take Ertz if it's the right deal, which I trust Brandon Beane will make the right deal if he's going to get Ertz. But my biggest beef with Knox is everyone's like frustrated with his catching and stuff, and I'm really not. I thought it was something that he improved on quite a bit. Some of the drops that he had were just, they stood out. Right. Like but he made plenty of catches and he improved in that area. And I heard Joe Marino, and Joe and I have been probably seen as pounding the table for Knox more than most people. Mm-hmm. My problem with Knox is blocking. And I don't know if he'll get better at blocking, but I have a bigger issue and concern with his blocking than I do with the drops or that issue. I think that's a vastly overstated issue that he can't catch and that he drops all the balls. I don't think that's true. And I think he's going to continue to get better there, but I don't know if he is going to get better at blocking. And I don't know that he is this year, right? Like that's something that takes some time to develop. He hasn't had a lot of burn as a tight end. I know people are sick of hearing that, but it's true. It's a long developing position for a lot of guys. And we talked about Josh Allen being a raw prospect. Dawson Knox is much more raw at his position than Josh Allen was coming in at his position. So some of it is time. And I agree with Greg that hope is not a plan, but I don't think that the Bills are looking at just hoping Knox works out as their plan. They're clearly actively shopping for Ertz, right? Like they have other plans in place that they're trying to get. They brought in Hollister. They're going to have that as a competition. While I think Knox is the starter, Sean McDermott's he's going to make that an open competition all summer long. So they're trying to do stuff at that position and push it forward. So I don't think that they're hoping. And I think that I agree with Joe Marino that Knox has given evidence that he can be a productive average tight end in the NFL as his floor.
Yeah. And I think for me, it comes with that Knox would be a high end tight end 2 versus being like a lower end tight end 1. And if we can do that for the team, cool. But I think it's but that's,
there's only so many balls. There's one ball on the football field, and it can only go to one guy per play. And here's the other thing that I talk about a lot. Not that I want the Bills offense to come out and run the same exact offense that they did a year ago, because that's obviously not going to work. Right. People have that on tape. But I don't want it to change all that much. Like, I don't want to force feed a tight end the ball or start.
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, there's too many. I think they improved over John Brown by getting Manny Sands. I just had to give you the names. I think they improved there, though. So I want to get these guys the ball. You know, I want to find ways to get Gabe Davis the ball. I don't want to take the ball out of Gabe Davis's hands to give it to Zach Ertz, who can't do anything after the catch. He's just an open target. But there's a place in this offense for more consistency at the tight end position. So I get it. But there's not a lot more touches to spread around. I don't think any of the tight ends come in, whether it's Ertz or Knox having an improved year, and just are much more than an average tight end in the NFL, because I just don't think the offense is going to gear towards getting them the ball and feeding them the ball. It's still going to be a Stephon Diggs. Cole Beasley's going to get his, and Manny Sands I think is going to produce more than we saw from John Brown a year ago, and you're going to have a hard time keeping Davis off the field. So it's too many mouths to feed to then just start forcing the ball to a tight end too.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't see a tight end coming in and putting up like 80 catches or 90 catches. Like whoever is going to be our tight end.
Move the chains a little bit. Yeah,
you're looking like the 40 to 55 catches. If a tight end has a great year in this offense, I feel like you're looking at 60 catches, maybe, because Diggs is going to get his, Bees is going to get his. I love the Manny Sands references. Gabriel Davis, potentially Isaiah Hodgins, potentially some other things. Also, if we're to believe some of the things that Josh Allen has spoken about, we might see running backs get more receptions this year. He might dump it down to Moss or Singletary or Breida or potentially another running back. It'll be very interesting.
Christian Wade, is he going to get?
Yeah, I was going to make a Christian Wade joke, and I was like, no, I don't want to open up
your mentions. Your mentions will just fire.
What? Christian Wade. It'll be both ways because it'll be the people.
Oh, you'll get the stands.
Exactly. I don't know which is worse. The people are going to be like, dude, that's ridiculous. He's never going to make the team versus the people who are like, I have Christian Wade's face tattooed on my chest. I love that you mentioned
They're holding him back.
Exactly. They're holding him back. Now that we brought in Obata, the British Bills connection is alive. Yeah, the British Bulldogs, Davy Boy, Dynamo. It's going to be great. No, I don't want that. Also, for everybody in the comments and the chats, I'm keeping track of comments and thoughts that people are putting through, and we will get to those questions at the end. So don't think your questions are going in vain. They will be answered. One of the words you mentioned with regards to Dawson Knox that I mentioned as well was hope. And for this first person that we're going to talk about, I think there was some hope, not from a production standpoint, from a hope in terms of what this player was going to look like returning this year. We saw in mandatory minicamp the return of Mr. Star Lotulelei. He came in. We saw some workout videos the couple weeks leading up to him of him looking nice and svelte and in shape and looking good. And he showed up to camp and his hair was flowing beautifully. He's got a sweet beard, looked to be moving pretty good. What are your feelings and thoughts on Star Lotulelei? I know you and I spoke about it both on Twitter, especially around the trade deadline last year, about the Bills' need for a one tech and what the Bills needed to do to go forward for that. Star, for all intents and purposes, is that one tech need and post that we are hanging our hat on going into the 2021 season. With hearing what he said, seeing what shape he's in, and how he looks, what does your faith level look like in him right now? Do you feel confident? Are you still concerned? Where do you sit right now on Star?
So Star is an interesting one because I go back a little bit as a Star stan. I think I have a fresh Twitter account as of recently, but if I had my old Twitter account, you would see a lot of arguments a couple years ago with fans that were upset with Star because he doesn't show up in the box score.
Nope.
But I've defended Star quite a bit, and I'm excited for his return to this defense. And when people were concerned that he was going to be out of shape or not, like he wasn't working out for this last year,
everybody's just like, he's just been sitting at home, like eating chips, not doing anything.
This modern NFL is so different than anything before. Like these guys are constantly in shape. That's why I'm not worried about like Diggs, whether or not he was at this. I see him on Instagram. I follow him on Instagram. I know what these guys do every single day. And I wasn't worried about Star in the same way. This guy's a veteran. We know what kind of character he is. So I knew that he would be in shape. And then to see the videos just confirm that, and then to see him back makes it even better. And I know McDermott kind of got on him in the media when it was asked about when Star wasn't at the voluntary stuff, and was like, oh, he's got some catching up to do. We would like to have him here. But I know deep down, Sean McDermott's not super worried about Star Lotulelei. There's a long training camp is a lot of football. There's a lot of football for him to get ready into that ready for week one. I'm hopeful that Star returns to his form, which is not going to be sexy. He's still not going to fill up a stat sheet. He's not going to do a lot of stuff that pops out during game day. But what he is going to do is going to make Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds' life easier, which is what he did before COVID. So and they talked about that. And Lorenzo Alexander has talked about that of playing with some of those bigger body guys and allowing them to do stuff. And he's also going to make Ed Oliver's life a lot easier. And that is probably the thing I'm most excited about this defensive line, is allowing Ed Oliver to be himself and not have to try to be Star Lotulelei and replace that size. And Star's not a big guy, so I don't want people to get the wrong idea that some giant is coming in and eating up space. But compared to what Buffalo has on the defensive line, he is that guy. He's essentially, he's our one tech for this year. So I still, at that position, I would like to see improvement. I'm a little disappointed they didn't get somebody in the draft for Star to groom over this year and show the right way to be an NFL interior defensive lineman. But this is better than the alternative of not having Star. So I think it's important that he's back. I think it's important that he looked good and at least looks healthy. And I think it should put to rest the worry for most fans.
I think, spot on. Great take. See, this is why I brought you on, because you're fantastic. I second pretty much all of those notions. My My biggest thing, I wasn't worried about Star like coming in and just being out of shape or just taking all this time off and not doing anything. My main worry was the potential, and I don't want to say bigger plan, but like the bigger of if he was like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to come back. I think I'm going to retire and I'm going to be done. And then we were screwed cap wise, position wise. That was my biggest worry. So I loved hearing him talk about, he got some flack for this from a couple people on Twitter. Shock, everybody gets flack for everything on Twitter though. Yeah. But I liked what he said where, it was tough for me to watch games last year because like I wasn't, I felt like I could have been in there. I could have been helping out and it was tough for me. And I've totally gotten that, like as a person who's played sports in multiple levels and into college, like I've had games where I've been hurt and I've been out and it, like you're there to support, but it sucks. Like you almost don't want to watch at the same time because you're like, oh, like I wish I was out there, and it's like painful to watch. And that to me was like, oh, sweet. Like I don't have to worry about the retirement thing. Like this was a COVID thing. He took care of it. It's done. He's coming back. He's ready to go. I like the shape that he was in. I also like that he mentioned he's down roughly 5 to 10 pounds from his usual playing weight, but he expects that to come back by the time the season rolls around. He's around like 300 pounds right now. He's normally anywhere from like 310 to 315. Shout out to Max Robleski and Mafia Numbers for throwing that in the Cover One group DMs earlier. So he's the man. And
I can gain 10 pounds like that, bro.
I know, right? Give me a whole bunch of pizza rolls and bagel bites and
give me just unlimited buffalo food for a week or two. I'll put on 10 pounds.
Mighty Taco and some Macy's pizza and whatever. I'm good to go. I'll do the 10 pounds right now. I can play one tech. And it made me feel better. I liked hearing what he said. I liked seeing him there physically. Obviously, I liked what I saw from his pre-camp videos and then what we saw in camp, and everything he said really ticked a lot of boxes for me. And to your point, I've also been a proponent of Star's play. For everybody who used to knock him, it was all like, oh, well, dude, we paid him all this money, and how come he doesn't have like 10 sacks? And how come he doesn't have like all these tackles and all this? He doesn't do a sexy job. He doesn't play a spot that is glorified and is nice and cute and shows up in the box score. He plants himself, he eats up space, takes up blockers, and he allows your sexy guys like Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds to flow free.
Play clean.
Exactly, and play clean. And I've said this a million times now throughout this offseason. Ray Lewis, one of the greatest linebackers of all time. Not that he wasn't good without certain guys, but Ray Lewis, when he had Tony Siragusa or Sam Adams or Haloti Ngata, was a much different level of Ray Lewis than he was when he did not have those guys. And the reason the Ravens took Haloti Ngata, he was a good player, but he was a space eater that they could put at nose and eat up guys and let Ray Lewis do his thing and work his magic and go sideline to sideline and be rangy. So I'm excited to have Star back, and my confidence is solid with him right now. My only worry, exactly to your point, is I hope there's enough depth at that spot and what we have last year. Again, I know Star was out, but it was scary having Ed Oliver wear that one tech hat, and then Quentin Jefferson had to wear it. I don't have a ton of faith in Vernon Butler. I'm hoping Harrison Phillips, another year removed from the ACL injury, is solid there, but we're still only operating with one tech in Star Lotulelei. And so that's the only thing that still gives me a little pause for concern at the position grouping as a whole. But on an individual level, I'm very happy and confident in him and where he looks to be.
Yeah, and even if he can't handle the full load of that position, right, and that we don't have much behind him, some Star is better than no Star at this point for this defense. This was still, Greg and I talk about this all the time. People are going to this is going to be like my toxic differential of the offseason of people getting sick of me saying this over and over again, but this was a top 10 DVOA defense.
Yes.
Like it was not as bad as people have made it out to be. And the defensive line wasn't as bad as people have made it out to be. And so you're adding to this unit. And Greg, if you're still watching out there, sweetheart, Greg made a great point though of like you didn't see a lot of, there was really no, outside of the draft, we didn't see sexy additions to this defensive line like people wanted, but there is a sexy addition in Star Lotulelei, hopefully allowing Ed Oliver to play to his true potential, because if you get Ed Oliver at the potential that some of us on Twitter think that he's capable of, I know there's some Ed Oliver haters out there and say he's a bust already. I love Ed Oliver. He's a super disruptive guy. And if you come in my mentions crapping on Ed Oliver, I'm going to give it right back to you.
But I was told he would be like Aaron Donald. And how come he hasn't won NFL MVP or isn't an All-Pro yet? Yeah. How come he's not Aaron Donald? I hate that comment.
I know, I hate it so hard. But here's the thing. I think he will play better this year because of that, and I think he'll be super disruptive. And I said this week on our show that I don't know that he'll all of a sudden be a double-digit sack interior defensive lineman, but I think he's going to be more disruptive than he was, which is crazy because he was still quite disruptive a year ago. And if you look at his PFF grades, they're not good. Like, it doesn't look like he had a good season. Yeah. But when you go back and watch the season, man, I consistently see Ed Oliver disrupting plays. He's not making the play, but he's altering the rush lane, and running back has to cut it back, or he's getting a quarterback off his spot, which leads to an interception or leads to an errant pass. So he's a very disruptive guy, and you add in Jerry Hughes, who's a super disruptive guy, and then you clean up, have Starr keep the linebackers clean and allow guys like Matt Milano, who's an incredibly disruptive blitzer. You start to get this defense starts to get real scary, and it's hard to maintain a top level defense. This is probably the biggest issue for Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier going forward, is they've done it now for 3 years in a row of having a top 10 DVOA defense. Can they do this 4 years in a row and keep this defense the same? It looked like teams were kind of starting to figure it out, but they tightened up as the year went on. But yeah, I don't think the defense is in as bad a shape as people think. And I believe, it's not a hope, I believe that bringing Starr back into it just improves the people directly around him. And those guys are such stars that improvement alone could be massive for this defense.
That's a great point. His absence last year was really a domino that kind of started a whole chain reaction throughout the defense, just because we weren't able to fill that spot. And then, exactly your point, what he does allows others around him to be successful, and not being able to have that successful domino had an impact across the whole defense. Then you add in the injuries and all the other things, and
especially people are playing out of position.
Exactly. There's so many things. And the fact that the Bills defense still finished in the top 10 DVOA, I'm big into DVOA as well. I love that. Yeah. I love all those advanced metrics. And I think people think of the Bills defense last year because the expectation coming into the year was, oh my God, this is going to be like the best unit in football. This is going to be a top 3 level defense. Oh my God. And because
they were all pros.
Yeah. Exactly. And because they were only top 10, it's the same thing with like the comparison to Tremaine Edmonds. Tremaine Edmonds is a good NFL linebacker. Is he Luke Kuechly like everybody was thinking he was going to be? No, he's not. And so of course the reaction is, well, Tremaine Edmonds sucks. No, and it was the same thing with the defense last year. That's a perfect microcosm of it. The Bills still had a good defense last year. Were they to the level of what they were in 2019? No, but they were still a good and impactful defense. And since we're talking about the D-line, I'm going to switch up the order a little bit in terms of, what we're speaking about here in our mandatory minicamp takeaways. So both in OTAs and then in mandatory minicamp now, we've seen a lot of positive news around the defensive line. The things with Starr, the comments that Sean McDermott has made about Ed Oliver, the progression of Gregory Rousseau, even how Mario Addison looks. There's a lot of positive buzz from the Bills defensive line, a unit that is tremendously important to this team and to this defense. So with what you've seen so far and your thoughts on going into the year, who, it could be one person, it could be multiple, who do you see having the largest positive impact on the defensive line this year and kind of making a difference for this defense?
Well, before I answer the question, I will say this is the hard part about OTAs for me, is because it's all going to be positive, and they're going to, I think it's more of a marketing opportunity for the team to get the fans excited for the year. They're going to sell us on the things that were flaws or considered flaws to the fan base, which is defensive line. But that doesn't mean that some of the stuff isn't true. I think there's a mix of coach speak and truth in here, but we're not going to see who these guys are until pads are on. You know what I mean? Like, until they can slap pads with the offensive line, we're not going to really know who these guys are. But it's nice to hear that your draft pick is progressing at a nice rate. And I believe Leslie Frazier when he says, he hasn't seen a guy like that. Like, I don't think Leslie Frazier's getting out there and lying and spitting out PR stuff.
Right.
So that's all good. As far
I would
as
like them to come out and be like, Rousseau's been terrible. I wish we didn't.
It's not working. This is not working. And so, yeah, there's you got to take some of it with a grain of salt. But so I think my biggest impact is, so this one's tough because I think Jerry Hughes is going to be the biggest impact player on this defensive line. I think his talent level compared to the rest of the guys, Ed Oliver has the potential to have the type of talent that Jerry Hughes has in terms of disruption and what a defensive lineman can do. But I think it's Jerry and there's a big gap. And then there's everybody else on this defensive line because I really think he still has the juice left. I think Jerry Hughes is one of the better edge rushers in the NFL a year ago. The sacks aren't there, and I know people are going to come at you and say, well, he didn't have double-digit sacks. I don't care. I want more sacks from the whole team. I really do. Yep. But sacks are not something that matters a ton to me. I like pressures. I like hurries. I like getting QBs off their spot. It does matter. Sacks are great. That's ultimately what you want, but pressures matter too. There's a real impact in the game, and the impact's changing because you have guys like Mahomes that can get pressured and extend plays and throw off balance, but more times than not, pressure matters, right? Like, and it works. And so I think Jerry played fantastic last year. I think he played with his hair on fire. He was my defensive MVP. I thought he had a fantastic year, week in and week out. Greg and I are doing the post-game show. We were talking about Jerry all the time, post-game, and how disruptive he was. So I saw nothing as the year went on that showed me that he was hitting a cliff. He could hit this cliff at any moment at his age, and time always wins. So he's getting closer to hitting that cliff than ever. But I haven't seen anything that shows that he's slowing down. So he I think is still the most impactful player. But to sort of answer the question with a B, I think it's I think Ed Oliver takes that lead this year, especially with Starr coming back, and I think Ed Oliver finally becomes that super disruptive guy. There's money on the line at this point too for Ed Oliver. It's still a business. It's still a job. He needs to have a big season here to really up his stock for whatever contract he's going to get next. It needs to start happening. So I think Ed is really going to be super disruptive. And then kind of a sleeper. I think people are sleeping on Mario Addison, dude. Ooh. I think people are sleeping on Mario Addison big time. I think we like these new toys, and I do too. But I think the team, I think the coaching staff, McDermott, Frazier, Washington, like vets that they can trust and that they can know what to do. And Addison wasn't bad last year. I think a lot of people thought because the sack numbers as a team wasn't there that these guys were bad. But Addison, for instance, I have it pulled up over here, actually. PFF has, I don't love PFF, but they have some interesting statistics. And one that I do like is PRP. And for those that don't know, PRP is a formula that combines sacks, hits, and hurries relative to how many times the person rushes the passer. So they count pass rush downs for edges, and they take that and anytime you sack, hit, or hurry, and how many. So Jerry Hughes was top 10 in the league of edge rushers that had 50% of snaps or more. He was top 10. But Mario Addison was 24th. Like, that's not bad. He's right there with Cameron Jordan, Olivier Vernon, Everson Griffin, Khalil Mack, Montez Sweat. I think if fans knew how disruptive he was based on that, because you can't go on Pro Football Reference and see a stat like that has context associated to it. So I don't know that fans see how disruptive he is. And he's not a guy that pops off the tape on game day, right? Like when you're watching the game, you don't walk away and be like, wow, man, Mario Addison had a great game. You just don't see it. But he's sneaky good. I think he's sneaky good. And I think it's going to be hard for some rookies who are both still have work to do. I know they're selling Basham as this NFL ready guy, but he needs some work and refinement. And obviously we know Rousseau does. You got some proven production in Mario Addison, and you're paying him either way to be here. He's going to get a good amount of money. There's no benefit to get rid of him. And he's the leader that Sean McDermott loves. Right when they picked Brandon Bean talked about it. He was the first person texting Brandon. Mario Addison's the first guy texting Bean after they just took two defensive ends who he could have got cut right then. You know what I mean? And he's texting him. He can't wait to get his hands on these guys. That stuff's super important to the Buffalo Bills. And I don't know if Addison will keep the starting job all year, but I think week one, he's the starter and he gets tons of burn this year that nobody's talking about.
Ooh, I like that. I like the PRP reference. I love that metric. I love anything just in general. Not to go off on a tangent, but context is so
Your show.
important.
You can tangent all you
That's
want
true.
to. Yeah.
So I want to talk about gardening and vegetables, which actually you would be a fan of. I was
Yeah,
that'd be right
let's
up
go
your
ahead.
alley.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Context is so important, and I think there's so many ways in which raw stats can be misleading, and sacks is a beautiful one. People just look and be like, well, that guy can't rush the passer. He only had this many sacks, and it doesn't take into account how many passer snaps you had, what's your pressure rate. PRP is a beautiful one. Situations, we don't. Ed Oliver is a great example too. The amount of double teams that Ed Oliver was seeing was crazy, and people don't even consider that. It's just like, well, he doesn't have this many sacks. People only talk about pass rush and equate it to sacks, and it is not the end all be all. There is no one singular metric. Same thing with, I got into a Twitter argument so long ago where someone was like, well, this running back's terrible. He only has 2 rushing touchdowns. I was like, your judgment of a good running back is based on how many rushing touchdowns he has? Like, that's not anything at all. There's so much context to be added. And I like your pick of Jerry and Ed. Jerry, to me, I don't know why I didn't even think of Jerry Hughes for this one, because I just always assume that he's always going to be like the best guy.
Consistent. Yeah, he's consistent.
Like, I just don't expect anything less. He's so underappreciated in the pantheon of the entire NFL. Like,
it's because that people put too much value on sack.
Yep, and he's not. And he has had good numbers, but nothing tremendously gaudy. He's just consistently plugging away, doing his thing. Jerry's a good one. Ed Oliver's a big one too. If we can have that interior disruption, which he's already been doing, and we can have it again with a third-year Ed Oliver with a returning Star Lotulelei, and Ed gets to wear the hat that he's supposed to wear, I'm very excited for that. They were close for me. Well, Oliver was close for me. My number one, and I'm going to kind of stick with the Mario Addison theme. I think Mario Addison leads the Bills in sacks in 2021.
Okay.
I like the way he showed up to camp a little bit leaner, and I think he'll be the starter to start the season. But it also ties into my other person that I'm kind of keeping an eye on.
I know where you're going.
Yeah. Addison's previous 4 years before coming to Buffalo, 11 sacks, 10 sacks, 11 sacks, 10 sacks. In a down year last year, he still had 7 sacks for the Bills. I think he gets more situational rushing, not in terms of like he's only coming in on third downs, but he gets more situations that are advantageous to his style and his pass rush ability. I think he leads the Bills in sacks. I don't think it's going to be crazy. I don't think he's going to have like 17 sacks, but I think he can easily lead this team with like 9 to 11-ish somewhere sacks. I think Jerry will be up there as well. But I also think in tandem with AJ Epinesa, who is my other defensive lineman, I think is going to make an impact. I know
strong
people
finish to the year.
Yes. I know people are coming around on it more and more. The Cardinals game, which sucked, and I don't really want to talk about it. It's kind of like Voldemort, he who shall not be named. But the big takeaway, obviously, was like how we lost in this and that. My big takeaway from that Cardinals game, AJ Epinesa looked like a completely different player, and I was so happy. But the sample size was small because then he gets hit in the head, the concussion, and he's done. And then as he progresses throughout the year, exactly like you said, he had such a strong finish. I love how he showed up into camp. I love that he's more adjusted to his playing weight. I love the way he's added muscle and changed his physique and has stabilized that a little bit. I like that he has an entire NFL offseason that's not a crazy COVID offseason to adjust to the league. I think it's no coincidence that as he got more NFL experience and practice time, he became a better player as the season progressed. And I think he gets a lot of, we're talking about Basham and Rousseau, and rightfully so. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it did.
I like it.
But I think I got bars. But AJ Epinesa is someone who I think sees a lot of rotation at defensive end spot with Addison and Hughes. And I think we might even see more AJ Epinesa potentially in early downs and setting the edge and doing the grinding, non-sexy edge work that allows more of the pure pass rushers to feast. And as much as everybody thinks like, oh, we're going to put in Rousseau on third down and it's going to be Rousseau and Jerry and Ed Oliver and whatever. I think Mario Addison also eats in those scenarios too. And if we have a fresher Mario Addison coming off the edge, I think that's part of the reason why he could lead this Bills team in sacks. But I'm excited for a lot of the guys on the defensive line, but Addison and Epinesa are definitely ones that I have my eye on, especially considering I guess how little really they get talked about, because especially this offseason, it's Rousseau and it's Basham and then Jerry Hughes.
And we're just gonna, it's like Madden. We're just gonna throw those 2 rookies in, and our defense is gonna be fantastic. It's gonna take time for those guys to steal some of the snaps from these guys. I like Epinesa. I think that's a good one. He's a guy that I've been saying I think he needs to take that step. I think usually it would be the following year for him where he really needs to prove it. But because they took 2 edges this past draft, I think that he needs to hurry up and take that step to show that he is a big part of the future when Jerry Hughes leaves and Mario Addison leaves, and that they can rely on the 3 of them as that rotation going forward. So I think there's a lot of pressure on him to come out and be that guy that really takes a percentage of the snaps this year and is part of that rotation. I love what you said about fresh legs. We hear Brandon Beane talking about that all the time. That is what they want at defensive end. I know they were in on the JJ Watt stuff, and I think if they had a chance to get a top tier guy that they would do that, but I also think that they're happy to have a healthy rotation where you can have fresh legs. And I think that's an ideal situation for them. So yeah, the rotating I think will be fantastic for Addison. And I think that'll help Epinesa grow. And really we just need those guys. We talked about the disruption. We talked about the hurries and the pressures. We need these guys to finish those sacks. And I do think that's where people get excited about Rousseau, right? Like we saw that he can reach around an offensive lineman and grab somebody that's running away and stuff like that. But these other guys can do that too. We just need those guys to clean up some of this. One thing I want to touch on before it gets lost in the chat here, I forget where it is. There's a conversation here going on that about Star Latulele versus kind of Justin or Jordan Phillips.
Yes.
So somebody talked about how Jordan Phillips is an example of snacks can be inaccurate, but they were also not in the same position. So if we're talking Star's job versus Jordan Phillips' job, they weren't. Jordan Phillips wasn't playing 1 tech, right? It was swapping out with Ed Oliver at the 3 tech, and Star and Harrison Phillips were sort of battling that year. So we're talking about 2 different roles, 2 different jobs there. I saw that happening in the chat, and I just wanted to. It's like on Twitter. If it was on Twitter, I'd get in your mentions, but I wanted to.
That's fair. That's fair. That comment in the chat also came from a conversation from somebody who said that all of the ex-Panthers are a waste of cap space. So I wasn't even going to pay attention to it because I thought that was foolish.
Tough. That's tough.
Yeah. A little bit tough there. I'm excited for the defensive line, and
a lot of pressure on Eric Washington before we get off of that. He got a lot of young talent, and he needs to get a lot out of that talent this year.
For sure, especially now that I think the Bills defense implicitly, based on how the draft went, and then explicitly stated by Beane and McDermott, we've seen now that this team is a pass rush over coverage type of thing, and how much they value the pass rush and how they put a premium on it. And yeah, the idea of a Sean McDermott defense, they want to just rush 4. They want to play their zone defense behind it. You need to have good rotation and success up front. Eric Washington now you've got a mix of a group where you've got young, somewhat established guys. You've got older veterans who have been productive, and now you've got high draft picks. Now it's going to come down to we've given you, the ingredients, and now you need to make a meal. I'm very interested to see the impact that he has on the D-line, especially too because I think everybody had such high hopes going into last year's season with the additions we made to the D-line. Everybody's like, oh my God, Quentin Jefferson and Vernon Butler and Addison, and this defense is going to be this. There is a decent amount of pressure on him. That's a very good point.
Yeah. Thank you. I like to make good points.
You're a good guy.
Try to.
This next person, I'm very excited for this person. And I know I almost didn't want to bring him up because I feel like now this is like the sexy person to bring up because everybody's bringing his name up, and I didn't want to, but I've been on this train for a long time, and I'm very excited to see him. Isaiah Hodgins, a lot of positive buzz, again, as there are for a lot of guys, because nobody at this time. I love the point that you made about how it's not like putting out narratives, but yeah, people are going to come and talk about all the positives. Nobody's going to come out and be like, oh, what do you think of Timmy? And no one's going to go. Coaches will be like, well, Timmy's played like trash. We're probably going to cut him.
Struggling pretty bad.
He's down on the depth chart. We're probably not even going to keep him past June. But Hodgins has had really good reports.
Mm-hmm. He did last year too. He did.
Correct. He did last year. I know a lot of us are high on him. My biggest thing is, where he shakes down in this receiving pecking order. So as of right now, we've got Stephon Diggs, we've got Manny Sands, we've got Cole Beasley, Gabriel Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, Jay Kumaro, Brandon Powell, Duke Williams, Tanner Gentry, Marquez Stevenson, Lance Lenoir, and then Isaiah Hodgins. What are your thoughts? Isaiah Hodgins, does he make the 53? What's his path to the 53? Can he be a long-term option, or is he a nice guy who's got some talent who just maybe wrong place, wrong time, can't crack the roster?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he does. The 53 is going to get real tight this year because of what we talked about earlier, that depth's increased and there's some battles there. I think he does. I think in my mind, I haven't really taken a hard look at the 53 yet to start really predicting numbers and how it's going to shake out. But without having a detailed look at those numbers on the 53, I feel like you got to keep the investment in him because you lost the year last year and he was trending in a good way in training camp and he showed you quite a bit, I think, in training camp last year. So if he continues to improve on that with full health, we saw him tweet out the other day that now he is fully healthy and good to go. I think that you want to get him in here. He's not a guy. Greg and I talk about this all the time, that we fall in love with these undrafted dudes during training camp, and then everybody's like, "Oh no, my God, you can't cut them. They're gonna end up on the Patriots. They're
gonna win a ring.
Yeah, they're gonna get signed everywhere." And most of those guys don't. He's one of those guys. Hodgins is one of those guys that is probably going to another team if the Bills were to cut him. So I think they try to find a way to keep him. I think he's part of the future. And the problem for me is getting excited about him now. I don't see any touches for him. I don't see any way that he has meaningful contributions to 2021 unless something goes wrong, right? We're only seeing him as a hefty part of this rotation getting snap counts if somebody's hurt and things aren't going well for the Bills. So I don't want him to have a lot of production in 2021. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. So that's a tough one because then he's not going to be your special teams returner that we talked about. So you still need a wide receiver most likely to handle that role. So the numbers start to get a little sketchy down there at the bottom of that wide receiving core. But I think you have to keep him because Manny Sands ain't staying around for long. Stephon Diggs is going to be here for a while, but Cole Beasley will not be here for long either. If the fans don't run him out of town first. He's an older receiver too. So you need to start having guys in there to replace these guys. And I think Gabe Davis and Hodgins could be the future for this team in a few years, but he can't be if you don't keep him. So I think they try to find a way to keep him. He's a draft investment. And there's been some return on that investment, even though fans haven't seen it. I think they've seen it inside that building, and I think they hold on to that investment.
That investment piece is a very good point. I'm glad you mentioned it. Greg Thompson tweeted it earlier when somebody, I forget who, forgive me, Ryan something on Twitter tweeted at Greg and I regarding Isaiah Hodgins, literally right before I sent out those tweets about Isaiah Hodgins that you retweeted, which I didn't even mean to do on purpose. I didn't even see that other guy's tweet, talking about, what is Hodgins doing? Greg had that point as well, the investment piece. And he also had a very interesting point as well. The idea that I think a lot of fans have just made up their mind that like, well, okay, Isaiah McKenzie's making it.
Oh, I don't think he is.
Exactly. Like he might not. And some people are thinking that he won't. And that's a big part. Like thinking that McKenzie is, golden and in on this team isn't a guarantee. And then also tying in with that returner piece is a big thing. If Marquez Stevenson can somehow nail down the kick returner and punt returner duties, then we've saved a roster spot. And then he's making the team. And then that whole idea of roles and hats that one player can wear, combined with the investment of having someone like Isaiah Hodgins and Marquez Stevenson and Gabriel Davis and all these guys who are under contract and under cost control over the next several years versus guys who are on one-year deals, even if they are affordable deals like Isaiah McKenzie, but still one-year deals nonetheless. That investment and talent piece and role aspect is very interesting. My only worry still with it, exactly like you mentioned for Hodgins, he's not a guy who's going to crack the special teams roster. And I don't see Stephon Diggs, Manny Sands, Cole Beasley, Gabriel Davis. Those are, I think, for all intents and purposes, correct. Those are your top four. Those guys are getting the majority of the touches. Whoever is the fifth receiver, don't really see them getting a lot of snaps, to your point, unless, God forbid, somebody goes down, something happens, so on and so forth. So that fifth, sixth receiver, those got to be guys who, Andre Roberts was a guy who was dressed as a wide receiver, but he was a special teams guy. Like, what other hat are they wearing? Same thing like Tywan Jones dresses for the running backs, but he's really just a special teams guy. that really is going to impact a lot for me. And I think that roster decision, and it's so weird to be, I'm not in love with Isaiah Hodgins, but I liked him more than Gabriel Davis last year. And then Gabriel Davis had a great year. And I'm still on Hodgins now. And I pulled up the tweets. I mentioned the tweets that I put out earlier that you retweeted. So just some fun facts for everyone for Isaiah Hodgins. His senior year, or not senior year, so in 2019, the last year before he got drafted, he had the lowest drop rate of all the wide receivers that came out in the 2020 draft class in 2019. He had a drop rate of 1.1 in 2019. Of all the receivers that came out in the 2020 draft class, he had the lowest.
Can anyone name who was throwing him the ball?
Yeah, exactly. Do you know who was the Oregon State quarterback? I doubt it. His career drop rate is 1.7%. He had 179 catchable passes thrown to him in his college career. He dropped 3. His last 2 years in college, he led the entire nation in contested catch conversion rate at 67.4%. In 2019, he led the entire nation in red zone catch percentage. He had 12 catches out of the 13 thrown his way in the red zone. 9 of those catches were for touchdowns, for a 69% touchdown rate. Nice. Which was second in the entire nation. So he led the nation in red zone catch percentage, second in red zone touchdown percentage. His rating when targeted in the red zone for QBs was 141.2, which was second in the nation. And in his entire career in the red zone, 21 catches on 22 targets, 16 touchdowns, no drops, 18 first downs. I also hate the comparison for people where they're like, well, Zay Jones had a bunch of catches in college too. They are not the same. The catch radius, the route running, the ability to separate with the route running, the ability to find space, combined with the hands and the placement. Isaiah Hodgins does a lot of really good things from a technical standpoint. And to your point, if he's a guy that we cut loose for whatever reason, I think he gets snatched up in a heartbeat. Yeah. Like it is just a matter of how does the rest of the roster and receiver room and punt return, kick returner duties, special teams, how does that all shake out? Because I think that has more impact for him, not because he's not good enough, but I just don't see that top 4 getting cracked. Like I don't think he's jumping Gabriel Davis, and he's definitely not jumping Cole Beasley or Manny Sands.
No, but I think to your point about, those guys that are going to be in his spot on the roster typically have to produce on special teams as well. And I don't know how he is as a special teams player because we didn't see him play. There was no preseason last year, so I'm not sure if he can contribute even in a minor role on special teams just to have a reason to be out there, right? But even if he doesn't, one thing I think the Bills have done a really good job on is filling the back of that roster with really good special teams players. You mentioned Tywan Jones. Saran Neal, I think, is one of the up-and-coming special teamers in the league. I think he's the best special teams player on this team. Tyler Manikevich. You got these guys who take a ton of snaps and are very productive special teams players. We talk about special teams, or we talk about DVOA. I forget exactly where they're ranked, but the Bills were one of the top special teams DVOA teams. I think they were top 5 pretty much all year.
And they were top 3 for a very significant portion of the season as well, especially from like around the Chargers game all the way through like week 13, 14-ish. They were around top 3. And then the touchdowns from McKenzie, the touchdown from McKenzie in week 17 boosted them up. But yeah, they were consistently top 5, top 3 unit all year.
Yeah, and so I think that allows you a little bit of leeway at maybe a roster spot. I'm not saying this allows you leeway across your roster, but I think you can find a way to get Hodgins on your roster and know that he's not going to have a lot of production, and he's probably not going to. He might not even be a game day active.
Very true.
Person every single week, because I do think Stevenson, can do maybe enough to also have that gadget Isaiah McKenzie role if Isaiah McKenzie also doesn't make. And I kind of skip over McKenzie, man. When I saw his contract to resign here, that immediately screamed to me that this guy's not a safe bet to make this team. They didn't give him a contract that locks them in. They can walk away from him. And then we heard the comments about how hard it is to field punts in Western New York. And that to me was an indictment really on everybody here at One Bills Drive. That was probably the only negative comment I think we heard this week about how hard it is to field those punts, because dude, Isaiah McKenzie has been in the league long enough that he should be a consistent guy that the coaches feel comfortable can field punts. If he was going to do it by now, I feel like he would have figured it out. The fact that they brought a bunch of dudes in for tryouts and even brought that Powell from the Falcons in, and they drafted this kid, and his main purpose is to return as a returner. It screams that's an indictment that Isaiah McKenzie is not a guy that they trust to do that with any consistent. We saw the touchdown with McKenzie, but that seemed more of an anomaly from McKenzie than what we saw previously when he had a chance to return punch, which was tons of inconsistency and bad decision making.
And that played more to it before he was in Buffalo, like it's been his whole career.
Yeah, and that's an important part that I don't like. I think one of the things about Andre Roberts that gets kind of brushed over is it's not just the big plays he makes, but it was the good decisions. And he had a few at the end of the year that weren't great decisions, but he pretty much mostly made good decisions with the football. And you just never saw that yet with Isaiah McKenzie. So that's a big unknown. But anyways, I think there's a roster spot here for Isaiah without having to play and being a game day inactive mostly.
That's a very good way to put it. I'm excited for that battle. And a lot of comments came after, but somebody put it there in the comments. It's kind of something, Aaron, to what you and I mentioned earlier. The comment here is, how good does it feel for all of us sitting here literally splitting statistical hairs on these wide receivers compared to three? Yeah, we're sitting here having, and it's a good conversation to have, but we're sitting here talking about like, man, what's the fifth and wide receiver going to look like versus, 3 years ago, we were sitting like, oh man, are Kelvin Benjamin and Zay Jones going to be the truth for us and our weaponry? Like what?
Well, this is what we were talking about earlier, dude. If this was 3 years ago and we had a Hodgins, we would be praying and hoping that he could turn into the real number one wide receiver this year and take that role, because that's how bad and depleted that team is. So it's the conversation we were having before of just like hoping that guy that you drafted later is an undrafted guy just totally becomes the best receiver on your team. And that would be the pressure that would be on him now. Now we're trying to figure out, can he make this team?
That's exactly right. Oh man, what a good problem to have. And that's one of the top camp battles that I'm looking forward to, and preseason snaps I'm looking forward to, and this next person that I'm looking forward to as well. And I know you are as well, because you like defensive backs.
I do. They're fun.
Here's a guy that has a super fun name, Rashad Wild Goose. Again, another guy who's had positive comments thrown about him. But we've also seen some reports from some of the guys who've seen some of the camp action that he's flashed. He's had some interceptions. He's made some good plays. We know that he is a little bit faster than a lot of the DBs we got on the roster, 4.41 40 time. He also had the fastest miles per hour for defenders on that speed leaderboard that was posted from OTAs. My question for you regarding Rashad Wild Goose, because it's also – I don't think we can talk about Rashad Wild Goose and not talk about someone who is very near and dear to your heart, Mr. Taryn Johnson, whose contract is up after this season.
Yes, sir.
So there has been some positive Wild Goose talks. For you, what would it take for you to see from Wild Goose to make you feel secure that he is going to be a legit piece of this defense going forward, or even a potential? Because some people, I think it's a little dramatic, but some people are throwing out like, oh, he's the future at nickel, Taryn Johnson's gone, or he can be the future at outside too, so on and so forth. What would you need to see from him this year to make you feel comfortable that he can be a reliable piece going forward? And his rookie year this year, do you think he's going to be on that Dane Jackson kind of timeline, or do you see him getting not meaningful snaps, but being on the game day roster early on, or more later towards the end of the year, or God forbid something goes wrong like a Dane Jackson scenario?
I think some of it depends on Taryn Johnson and how he performs, right? Because we saw they tried to replace him last year with Cam Lewis, and that he got hurt, and then Taryn came back and played well. I think he did a pretty good job for most of the year. I think people will see those highlight plays in the playoffs and probably overstate who he is. But the Bills like Johnson, and he is a hell of a run defender, and he's reliable, and he's pretty consistent. And that's going to be hard for anybody to overcome or to replace, especially a late round rookie. I don't see a scenario where Wild Goose really comes in and challenges anytime early. I think that's going to take some time. This guy does have exactly what you said. He has the speed that the Bills don't have. He has that athleticism, but he's very physical, right, in college. And that's going to take some time for the Bills to kind of coach him into that. And he is physical, but I'm not sure if he's ready to come in and be the type of run defender that Taryn Johnson is right now, or the type of blitzer that Taryn is off the edge right now. And there's an important part. We talked about the continuity earlier, and we heard Matt Milano kind of talking about that and how ahead of schedule this defense is. Part of that is the communication. There's so much communication that goes on between, I believe, and I might get killed for this, I think nickel is the hardest defensive back position to play. And I'm not sure that it's close. You have so much field to worry about. You're dealing with passing, especially in a Sean McDermott, Leslie Frazier, where you're playing a lot of zone. You're passing off to linebackers. You're right in the middle of it. There's a lot of communication that needs to happen. There's a lot of responsibilities that get passed off in certain scenarios. You have to be on your toes. And playing in the middle of the field and you're playing off coverage, you can't really get up and press because you're dealing with your Edelmans and your Cole Beasley types that are motioning in and they're off ball. That's a hard thing to deal with. You're dealing with some of the shiftiest athletes. It's a very hard position. I think he holds up well. He had more snaps at the nickel position than any defensive back in the NFL a year ago. So he's a big part of a top 10 DVO. I'm going to keep going back to it. I'm telling you, people are going to get sick of hearing me say it. He's a big part of a top 10 DVOA defense. And that's going to be hard for Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier to just walk away from him and because he's at a contract next year. I think that he's a big part of 2021. Wild Goose would really have to come out and just be super polished and just that much better than Johnson to really take that job from him. I think that, where he needs to carve out a role for himself is that a reliable rotational guy, because he does have some of that flexibility to go play outside or play inside possibly. So I think he needs to establish himself as a guy that can be versatile and play both those things and that they can rely on to be that backup. If the Levi and Dane, one of those guys doesn't have the year that we think they're going to have, although I think Dane's trending in the right way to not worry about that. But depth gets real hairy at cornerback every single year and happens fast. You get one injury and then things start to get scary, right? And we know Johnson has an injury history. I don't know if he can hold up for another season. So Wild Goose, it would be nice if he comes along fast, but I don't know that we can count Cam Lewis out of this yet. The Bills liked him, so we'll see. I don't know that he's counted out totally yet. I like Wild Goose. I think he's a bit of a project. I think this could take a couple years. I am actually in favor of bringing Taryn Johnson back. I think I would do everything in my power to keep this defense together as long as I can intact. As long as if they go into this year and it totally, he becomes just a total liability that they can't cover up anymore. But if he plays like he did towards the end of the year, and as the Bills went on that run, which I think he played really well, I'd have a tough time not trying to bring this guy back and just have your project and Wild Goose on that cost control that can hopefully be a nice rotational defensive back for you going forward.
I think that's very fair. The hope for me, I want Wild Goose to be legitimate because as of right now, only Wild Goose, Tre'Davious White, and Dane Jackson, those are the only three corners we have under contract after the 2021 season. And my concern with Taryn Johnson, despite the massive pick sixes, he from time to time and at different times, he can be a bit of a liability in coverage, especially in a man aspect.
Sure.
But I mean, for as much as the Bills play nickel defense, which nickel is their base, it is some of the most beautiful film to watch Taryn Johnson, who basically at times functions as the third linebacker, coming up and setting the edge and spilling things or funneling things back inside or what. There are clips where Taryn Johnson is, to your point, lined up in the slot, reads run, shoots inside, gets through an offensive guard, and at the NFL level, like rips through, gets in, makes a play in the backfield, all in the blink of an eye in a split second. He makes a lot of impact plays. He's physical. He's great in run support. It's not easy for anyone, let alone a rookie, to come in and bring that level of physicality that Taryn Johnson brings from that nickel corner spot. And to your point, I think corner in the NFL today is the hardest position in the NFL, but even more so, to that nickel spot, it's not like you can sit on the outside and be like, okay, like I have the sideline to help me.
I can play the boundary. Yeah,
correct. You don't have that extra boundary defender that the boundary is. You are on an island inside, and you've got those responsibilities. The man in front of you, maybe support outside, coming up for the run, filling in here. There's so many things that you have to watch for, and I like Taryn Johnson. I would like him to be more reliable in coverage, but for what is asked of an NFL nickel corner, Taryn Johnson's done a lot of good things. And I don't think I've seen a lot of hype for Wild Goose, but he does, to your point, you mentioned how like aggressive he is, which is good. He's got some aggressiveness to his game that needs to be cleaned up and polished. He's got some of that uncontrollable aggressiveness that leads to him being beaten in coverage and even in some run support sometimes. He does have very fluid hips. He's got good coverage instincts. I like what he brings from a raw, intangible perspective, but I think he will need that coaching and that cleanup. And if he sees time early, I think it's because we're in a DEFCON 5 scenario and a whole bunch of bad things happened. If he sees snaps, I think it's going to be later in the year, but I think he has to make a lot of, not significant progress, but a decent amount to supplant someone like Taryn Johnson, who has had his struggles, but has been very strong in multiple aspects of this defense. And you mentioned it, and I know I mentioned it here. I don't think we can really understate the impact that nickel corner is a nickel corner, but basically is the third linebacker. So you have to wear a whole bunch of hats in one role. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially for a rookie.
Here's a couple of interesting things about Taryn Johnson. This is what I love about PFF. I give PFF a ton of crap, but they have, if you don't go in there and look at grades and you go in there and look at their advanced statistics, it's fun stuff. Taryn Johnson had his, so they give you NFL passer rating against in terms of slot corners, again, that played 50% of snaps last year. He was fifth. He had the fifth lowest NFL passer rating. He's right there with like Marlon Humphrey and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. These are names that you love to. If we had them, you would be a lot more excited. And he is also right there in coverage snaps per reception. He's right there with those guys. They're at 8.3. He's at 7.9. So he's not. There was times last year where he got picked on or gave up numbers of receptions, but you rarely see him. There was a couple times probably against Casey where you saw him trailing and it just lost a step to a guy in man coverage. Yeah. But this is the same conversation that I have about Levi Wallace, is that they give up receptions, but not all receptions are a negative thing. Like reception, the NFL is full of reception. Like it's the pass happy league, and we're seeing record breaking statistics in every single game, every single week long. So you're going to have guys that give up receptions, especially when you have a Tre'Davious White who really takes away an option, or teams try not to throw in his direction. They're going to throw somewhere else. These guys are really out of position, which is what matters the most to me. Is I'm okay. I can live with you giving up a reception, tackle the guy, get the guy to the ground, bend but don't break, right? Keep that defense moving. I trust that if this defense if a team has to drive a long drive against this defense, I'm taking my defense every time. It's not giving up the big plays. And Sean McDermott's been preaching that this whole time. And I think while Taryn had moments where he got picked on, he keeps plays in front of him. He does a good job tackling. He's usually in position. He communicates well with the other guys on the defense. There's some familiarity there. And I think when you really dive into who he is, I don't think that he's some massive liability like maybe Bills fans think he is. I think we get hyper-focused on our own team and we see maybe the weakest link or the perceived weakest link at a group, and we think that it's bad and needs to be replaced. But sometimes it's good to take a look at how they stack up to their peers along in the league. And at nickel, I think he's fine. I think he's a good NFL nickel cornerback.
That's a very good point. And even within that, I think what's a cool thing that just ticked to my brain now, the idea of like comparing him to his peers. And if we're talking about contract situations and things, there's a decent amount of nickel corners who are still on the market. Brian Poole is still on the market right now. It was a good nickel corner for the Jets last year. The idea of Taryn Johnson leaving potentially next year, I don't think somebody comes through and like Taryn Johnson's getting like and this isn't a knock against him, but I don't think someone's coming through and giving Taryn Johnson like 3 years, $30 million.
No,
like
I think
he's not
get him
getting
back. Yeah.
Exactly. So we could bring him back, and I don't want to say affordable, but I don't think he's somebody that is going to get priced out of the Bills' range, regardless of what's going on in the cap. When you compare him to his peers, you did a great job comparing it in terms of like the analytics and the metrics. But if we also compare it to from a contract perspective, it could be a realistic thing to bring him back.
Yeah. And the most important stat of all is 0 touchdowns. He didn't give up any touchdowns. So when we talk about him being a liability, yes, but he also wasn't a liability in terms of giving up any touchdowns. He's not getting burnt. And I think a lot of people are saying, again, with Levi Wallace, I think people see him give up receptions and they're like, oh, Levi gets burnt all the time. It's like, no, he doesn't. Like the Bills rarely are getting burnt for big touchdowns. And when they do, it's usually a zone breakdown somewhere. It's not a man-to-man issue necessarily. But according to PFF, he gave up 0 touchdowns. And so I just think he's not as much of a liability as necessarily we think he is. He's probably the weak link on a really good defensive back unit.
Yeah.
At times it rotates between he and Levi, but that doesn't mean that they're bad. And I talked about this a lot going in. My favorite thing that Brandon Beane did this offseason wasn't anything sexy. It was returning the floor talent wise of a team that was in the AFC Championship game a year ago. So there's opportunities to get better at positions, but I think we know what the floor is across the board at positions, and I'm happy with that floor. It's a top 10 DVOA defense, a team that was in the AFC Championship game again. I can't be mad at this.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's the Levi connection with it too is so strong. You and I both were proponents all offseason of like, let's get a corner 2 in the draft, whether it's Asante Samuel Jr. or Melifonwu or some kind of some combo. But as much as we wanted that wasn't necessarily a death sentence for Dane Jackson or Levi Wallace. We wanted some more scheme versatility. We wanted the option to do things, but that floor comment is great. Levi Wallace is not a sexy corner number 2. But he gives you a good floor. He's reliable. He's smart. He's focused. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He has a great knack for tackling. He was best on the Bills in terms of missed tackle percentage, in terms of being the lowest. He's one of the tops in the league for his position. Like, he improved on that so much. He's got the length that the Bills like. He's not the biggest. He's not the strongest. Nope, he's not athletic. He's not the fastest. You can't line him up in one-on-one coverage. You got to give him some help over the top. But to your point, he gives you that floor, and he might be one of the weaker links on the team. But if the rest of your links are being the strength that you think that they should be, you would be fine. And no one's going to be perfect. I also think the idea of the metric for people, whether it's Taryn Johnson or Levi Wallace, I think we've gotten this. And I've been guilty of it too at times, the idea of being like, well, we got to match up with the Chiefs, and how do we cover the Chiefs? And not to bring Greg's name up again, but Greg, I forgot whenever he said it, how many people were like, oh, we shouldn't bring Milano back. Like, he can't cover Travis Kelce. Who can cover Travis Kelce? Like, no one can cover Travis Kelce. Or the same thing with like, well, we need somebody who can run, step for step with Tyreek Hill. Is there a corner now who can run step for step? No, like it's same thing with Mecole Hardman. Like, they're ridiculously fast. They're 2 of the fastest, if not the fastest people in the NFL. And they're also good route runners, and they're also well coached. So we can do things to mitigate that speed, but just bringing in one person to be the end all be all or match up with this thing, it's not a like for like or even just, let's grab this corner because he runs a 4.340 and boom, problem solved. That's not the thing.
No. And it's so hard to go back to like a game like against the Chiefs and then blame it on Levi Wallace or Taryn Johnson that you lose that game. I think there's so much that goes into losing a game and what makes a team better than you that I don't know that. Okay, so you get Greg Newsome in the draft. I don't think that the Bills all of a sudden come out and play the Chiefs and they're running man-to-man and able to keep up with these guys. Like, that's not how the world works for the NFL. There's going to be teams that have strengths that you don't necessarily match up against. And you got to find a way to, like you said, try to contain it, try to make it so it can't take the top off of you. And the Bills have shown the ability to do that. KC, and we're all comparing to them because obviously they're the one that's in the way and they're perceived favorite to win. But this is a very anomalous team in terms of having how much speed they have and weapons they have. Ridiculous. And the Bucs did a good job, but very few teams have had an answer to slow them down. And the Bills haven't yet, but that doesn't mean that they can't, even with the guys they have, because they've gone up against very good offenses. Sean McDermott has a great track record with this defense. They've gone up against good offenses and taken away parts of their game that other teams weren't able to do. And so I have faith in the staff. I have faith in the scheme. I really do. And I have faith in the continuity that they've created on defense. I hope Dane Jackson wins that job because I think he has the ability to take the ball away a little bit more, but he's also not going to come in and be some super athletic corner that allows you to play man. Like, that's just not going to happen this year. And so, yeah, we can talk about, well, nobody can run with Tyreek Hill, but yeah, that's league wide. That's a league wide problem.
Yeah, that's more like every team is having the problem of like, do we have anyone who can run with Tyreek Hill? No, we don't have anyone who can run with Tyreek Hill. Like that's just the long and short of it.
Hit Mahomes. That's what we got to do.
Oh, get some pressure. Compress the pocket. Starting to wind down now. If anybody has any questions, thoughts, feel free to flood them into the chat. I'm starting to work my way backwards to bring out some interesting thoughts here before Aaron and I start to wrap up here. And I know that the chat started to blow up a bit, so I can't go as far as back as I initially intended. So apologies to anyone in the beginning. I genuinely feel bad. But I want to grab this comment here. Gauge your thoughts here, Aaron. The question here is, what if Hodgins shows that he can only be effective as a big slot? Does he make the 53 then if he's only a big slot?
Yeah, to me, it still applies to everything we said that and Cole Beasley's not going to be here forever. You need to replace these roles, and you have the investment, you have him on a cheap contract. The more you can do that, the better. So even if he just is going to be a slot guy for his whole career, then I think that you get him in to the system, and when Cole Beasley's gone, you have a guy to replace him, and then you look for wide receiver number 2 or 3 wherever Gabe Davis ends up in the future. You continue to add on to it, but I don't think if he's limited in that way, I don't think you just walk away from that investment right now.
I would agree with that. And also to that point, I think, where am I in my notes? Yes. Isaiah Hodgins, actually a lot of what he's been getting at camp has been at the X and the Z receiver position. So basically split end and flanker. So he hasn't even been seeing majority of his snaps at the slot aspect. He's been seeing him on the 2 outside. So he is showing that positional versatility. So I do start to like that. And I know the talk has been of him being like a big slot. And I think that he has been successful there, especially when you watch the college tape, but I don't think his game is limited to that. I don't think he's somebody that's like, well, he can only be a big slot. And the fact that he's getting work now, I think the idea of the Bills like wanting to address that now and seeing what he can do. And also it speaks to the fact that he can do some of those things and being able to tie those things. We've seen multiple comments coming through. Tyler Bass is becoming a fan favorite this year. And the question here from Rich, does Tyler Bass improve on his massive rookie season and beat the record that he set last year? Aaron, how do you feel about Tyler Bass? Do you feel confident and comfortable with him, or is it just kind of like, cool story, but we'll see what happens? Are you confident that he's like a really strong piece? You feel good when he lines up?
Yeah, I do feel good. I didn't like the pick. I was a house money guy.
Yeah, who wasn't?
The consistency, and felt bad the way he got hurt and thought he would recover well, but just never got his leg back or his power back. But I was a little skeptical of going into the season with a rookie. I don't love the learning that a rookie kicker has to go through because I hate special teams a little bit. I really do. I hate having to talk about kickers on the post-game show. It's my least favorite thing in the world is to have to talk about a missed field goal or a muffed punt as the reason why a got out of hand. I still don't understand why in football we kick balls. I don't know how that came to be. And I get frustrated that I have to talk about those things. But I like him. I felt good at the end of the season that if, we needed a big kick out of this kid, that he was a big kick guy. And I think that if he does improve, it's going to be that Hack is a better holder than Borges was maybe. And that some of the issues that we saw with Bass, I don't think we're all on Bass early on either. I think Borges has had issues holding since he got in the league. Good punter, had a good year punting, but he's always had issues with holding. And I think a few people that are special teams, people that watch special team snaps, I don't know who does that on all 22, but said like some of it was the hold, a couple of holds or a couple snaps weren't perfect and didn't get there and laces and stuff like that. So I think if they get that down this year, that maybe he can improve, but I'm happy where he is. I don't need a ton of improvement on his leg. He made some big kicks and he came up big when we needed him.
That's a fair comment. As a Bills fan, I will never feel secure in any kicker ever.
Sure,
It
yeah,
doesn't
right.
matter who it is, but I like what I've seen from Bass. I like his confidence, and I subscribe to all the aspects that you mentioned from the holding and like the science behind that. I also do want to know who's out there watching all 22 special team snaps and like holds. Like maybe that's a knock against us. Maybe we need to be doing that.
Yeah, no. That's a weird niche.
Is there something wrong with us?
The only special team snaps I feel like I've ever really watched was Terry McLaurin in the draft when I fell so in love with him and I ran out of stuff to watch, so I started watching special teams.
You and we share many things, and our love for Mr. Terry McLaurin. Oh man,
so nice.
I love Terry. I love Scary Terry. Yeah. This is a very interesting comment, and it ties into your boy Taryn Johnson. So the question here: some people have entertained the idea that Tyrell Adams plays more snaps than we think, and Milano plays some of the Shaq Thompson role. Can that help everyone involved, including Taryn Johnson? I think that's a very interesting one. We saw some of I forget who reported it, and then there were comments on the idea that the Bills play a little more 3 linebacker sets this year, and that changes some of the role. I think that would be very interesting. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Nichols.
See it happening.
I think Nichols base.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Nowadays, I think that's it. I think going forward, Nichols base, and I think the NFL offenses. I don't think that Milano can do the Shaq Thompson role. I think he's good in coverage for a linebacker. I don't think he's that good in coverage where you can remove a nickel linebacker and then have essentially Milano playing that big nickel type guy. I just don't think he's that. I think they might try it at times, but I don't think it'll be a part of their defense. We talk about this stuff every year. We're like, what are they going to add to the day? Are they going to get a big nickel? Are they going to play a bunch of dime? Are they going to do all this? And really, they're pretty consistent in how they play defense. And it was a problem last year. I think teams started to figure out what the Bills were doing, and some of the disguised looks weren't there and weren't working with some of the injury things that they were doing. But teams were starting to get a read on the Buffalo Bills defense a little bit last year at times, and they had to switch some stuff up. So I don't know that they get away from. They like the scheme. I think they trust in the scheme and they believe in it. I think they stick with it going forward. Again, this is a top 10 DVO. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm gonna go back and count how many times I
was literally thinking, like, as you said it, I was thinking about here.
On the
counter. I was like, how many times have we said?
Like at least 8 or 9.
I want somebody to come into the chat and be like, where did they finish in the defense? Did we mention this? Or are we going on?
Not enough people are talking about it. This is something we should be excited about. Instead, we're like, people are just picking holes that this defense is the problem because we're caught up on the KC thing, right? Like the KC just kind of had their way with us. But outside of that, it was a nice year.
I would agree with that. Apologies to everyone who submitted questions earlier in the episode. I can't go back that far.
No, we found Greg's burner account
in the comment.
Thick dime.
I know I saw the thick dime. Oh man,
I hate him. I get so mad at him every time he says that. He knows it.
It's it really took hold a little bit in the draft talk. Big nickel suddenly shifted to thick dime, and it became kind of a trending hashtag that people were comfortable with. And oh man, look at how your face just changed. You are not a fan.
Not a fan. They're not going to play dime. Not going to play dime. They're going to be a nickel most of the time.
I wanted Jeremy Chin last year for the big nickel, Buffalo nickel, thick dime aspect, but sadly, alas, it was not to be. Ooh, awesome. Chris Kepner, thank you very much for the $5 super chat. I say it every time whenever anybody does this, that those things are awesome. Like the fact that you're literally giving us things like that is tremendous. Your time and your effort and your engagement, but also the financial aspect. Thank you so much, Chris. His comment here, Milano saying the D is way ahead of where they normally are is eye-opening. Mentioned new guys balling out. High hopes for Groot, Boogie, DH, and Wild Goose. That's an interesting thought I wanted to bring up as well. One of the random takeaways. Milano did mention some things of how the effort and the emotion has been there for the defense, and some of the guys, especially Marcel Louis-Jacques, covering the Bills for ESPN, mentioned that as well. Like how not that the offense isn't bringing energy and emotion into camp and to plays, but that there's a noticeable difference between how geeked up and amped up the defense is for this year. Do you think that there is a potential, I don't know, like, I don't want to say chip on the shoulder because I feel like it's so proverbial and easy, but do you think that there's a little more like added emphasis for the Bills defense this year because they hear the talk or they know what's going on. And now that they're healthy and they're a little more solidified as units start coming back and they've seen what happens, do you think they're a little more geeked up for this season than normal?
Yeah, I don't know why they are, but there's plenty of reasons that they could be. Everything you mentioned, I think they were trending in the right direction towards the entire end of the season. And Greg and I really hit on that a lot as we were getting into November, December football. And you hear Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier all the time talk about, that's when your team needs to be playing the best. And I wasn't worried about the defense in September, October. I needed them to be playing good in December, going into January, right? And we saw that. We saw the defense really step up and really start to be that defense. Because, again, to get where they ended in DVOA, I won't say it, but to get where they were, how they started, it was not a pretty start to the season. They were giving up tons of yardage, giving up tons of points. The offense really had to pull this team into some victories. It was not pretty on defense. And the turnaround that we saw and the trending in that right direction up until that KC game, I think got them very excited to see, hey, when we're healthy, when Milano and Edmonds are healthy, we got our unit, if we get Star back, like this could be, if we can kind of pick up where we left off at the end of last year, we can have something special if we start out better. So I'm sure there was a lot of excitement for this defense to get back, knowing the continuity that they were able to bring back together to, hey, let's run this thing back and hopefully we pick up where we left off.
I like that. And I second that as well. I think everything we've seen from, and it starts with McDermott and how they are in terms of, nothing is given to you, everything is earned. And then we see the comments from Josh Allen talking about just because we went to the AFC Championship last year, everybody knows that doesn't mean anything. So we're resetting the standard as playoff caliber, so on and so forth, yada, yada. And I think that extends from the best parts of the team down to the worst and down to a unit that, again, despite the fact that they were top 10 in DVOA, is viewed a bit of as an underperforming unit in that Bills defense. And I think they are a little more geeked up than normal. And to have everybody come back together and knowing how the season ended, where we lost in Kansas City and things were not good, and the performance that team put on the field from both the players in terms of execution and from how the game was called from coaching and everything. I think anytime you don't end the year with a championship, you're not pleased. But then the way that season ended, combined with all the talk and everything, I think the defense has a little more juice to their game this year. And I'm very excited to hear that they're all geeked up and jacked up, because we're geeked up and jacked up
all the time.
Throwing up the toodles, you guys. That means that we're starting to officially wind down, and leave. I want to, as always, thank everybody who was live with us in the chat from beginning to end, or of however long you timed out. The live show aspect is something that I didn't do before I was a part of the Cover One team, and now being here, it's awesome. The engagement and the fan interaction and the donations and everything that the live chat brings and doing the live stream is tremendous, and it wouldn't be possible without all you guys being here and supporting and engaging and all those things. And so whether you were here live with us now, or you're listening to this episode later, watching it later, whatever. Ooh, what's the comment here? Top 10 in DVOA is how the announcers can't help saying Fitz went to Harvard.
That's true. If you listen to our show during the year, it'll just be toxic differential. That's all I talk. I just handle that point.
You're a big one for that. I'm a big DVOA guy too, especially once we get into the year. But I start to do toxic differential and I chart it for myself, but I'm literally no, that's Aaron's thing, and so I'll cross it out.
No, the more the merrier. I think the more people we get on toxic differential matters, the better.
That's awesome. And yeah, so whether you're listening later, watching later, whatever, thank you very much for your support. Please rate and review and subscribe. I know it's been mentioned several times in the comments as well. It may seem corny or cheesy, but likes for everything that we do, whether it's on YouTube or the podcasting platforms, that means a lot, as do the subscriptions and everything. So please keep that up. We tremendously appreciate that. Oh, comment from Griff. He mentioned this, I believe this was mentioned last week. Looking forward to the Cover 1, 2, 3 wrestling podcast. I love the name. I love the pun. I love the connection with Cover 1. Oh my God, I'm just going to leave that up for, and also thank you for the donation, Griff, and your comment is awesome. I'm leaving this comment up. That's how good this comment is, that I'm going to leave it up over the toodles, you guys, for the rest of this thing. So thank you to Griff and everybody who supports us in every way, shape, or form. And of course, thank you to the elusive Aaron Quinn. I wouldn't have been able to do this episode without you. You made this super fun. I'm glad that we were able to get together, and yeah, you were awesome. Why don't you tell all the good people where they can find you and what you do and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, don't find me. I'm miserable. I don't want to talk to anybody on Twitter. Just follow Anthony. No, you can find me at Aaron Quinn 716. And thank you for having me on, man. And I had a blast talking to you. We went longer usually than Greg and I go, so don't tell Greg I went longer with you than I do with him. Yeah. No, it was a fun conversation. I think we have share some similar ideas of how this team is and ideas on football and stuff like that. So it's an easy conversation to have with you, and I look forward to more. I hope you keep pestering me to come back.
Oh yeah, I know I'm gonna have to, because I know you're gonna be busy.
It'll take a few times.
Make up some fake busy. Oh yeah, man, I gotta go run a 5K,
and fertilize my yard or something.
I do moonlight gardening, so it's already dark. I'm out.
It's hard,
Thank you so much.
Honestly, the real thing is I'm usually in bed at like 9:30, 10, and I'm an old man, dude.
Yeah, that's fair. But I appreciate you taking the time to stop by and the kind words for me. I've been a fan of Cover One and yours for a long time, so it's awesome to have you here and do this thing officially. And
appreciate that, man.
Yeah, no doubt. And
we're happy to have you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And appreciate everybody again watching, listening, downloading, passing good words to other people, being like, hey, you're a Bills fan? You ever checked out Cover One? Oh, man, they're amazing. All that kind of stuff. So appreciate anyone and everyone. As always, I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all staying safe and doing well. I'll see you guys next week. And as always, go Bills.